Good evening. This is Noreen. I'm here at the Ayurveda Cafe, and I have a wonderful guest this evening. We're continuing with our series, Jim Pace. Jim is a student of Vaidya Mishra from Los Angeles, and he is the part of the lineage SV Ayurveda. Jim will tell you a little bit more about that when he starts speaking. And also there's a company, Chandaka Products, as well. I am just going to introduce this week's topic. Just a moment. Okay. This week, Jim is going to continue with his previous discussion of the soul and the light of the soul, including the Ayurvedic definition of health with respect to the soul. Then then he's going to share the vibrational heart lotus and the definition of samadhi. Awesome. Wonderful. And also, I do want to apologize for my speech is a little off a little bit because I'm newly wearing braces. So I want to apologize to the audience for that. So Jim,
you're the only one that knows that because we've heard you talk like this. We think this is just normal. Your speech.
It is not normal. It is not normal. But anyway, it's kind of like when you have braces, it's kind of like having barbed wire in your mouth. So I know there's an Ayurvedic remedy, and we can probably do a whole show on that one. But that's the only way I can describe having braces, to be honest with you. So anyway, Jim, welcome to the Ayurveda Cafe. You're on the air. Take it off.
Thank you, Noreen. And tonight we are going to try to recap to a certain degree of what we spoke about last week, what is the soul, what is the individual soul, what is the cosmic soul, and how that affects our very existence, how it actually is our existence, and how it maintains our health when we are connected in constant communication and connection with the light of our own soul. So let me start tonight by going back a few steps. So again, what is the soul? Basically, the soul, we could say, is the God within us. And this is what Ayurveda believes and what the Vedic science and text tell us. And we say the heart is the seat of the soul. And last week I said we will come to that, and that's what we're going to go into a little more depth tonight. What is the seat of the soul, where the soul resides? And that's called the heart lotus, which shortly I'll go into more detail. So let's start back. What is the big soul? We call it Param Atma. Atma is the Sanskrit word we use for soul. And we could say there are two kinds of soul, but actually they're one. But conceptually, we could say there's the cosmic soul, the Param Atma, and then the individual soul, which is a part of that cosmic soul called the Jivatma. And this, of course, is a very big topic, obviously, what is the soul and how does that affect our health? So the soul, we can say, is the cosmic soul, the Param Atma, or Param Atman, we can say is that it has no gunas, it has no qualities. It's called nirvikar, which means that gem of the universe, we call it a gem. The soul is like a gem, Gem. It has no pathologies. It's perfect. There's a saying in Bhagavad Gita, the soul cannot be cut, cannot be burnt, cannot be wet. So many descriptions of what the soul is because it has no activity. It's silent. The soul is silent. The cosmic soul. The individual soul has some activity, but the Paramatma has no activity, no vibration at all. It is like a vibrational gem, but it's just silence. So we like to say that this cosmic soul, the Paramatma, has its light, which is called sattva or consciousness, but it's very pure. It's a pure light. That becomes dynamic as it expands into creating the universe. But it's always with that silence. That's why it's called sattva. It's always with the silence of the soul. The light is always with that silence. So it's always pure. And it's always blissful. The cosmic soul is always trying to think of the Sanskrit word for that. It is always ananda, in bliss. It has no greed. It has no jealousy. It has no anger. It's just the silence. It witnesses everything, but it doesn't partake in anything. It simply witnesses that. And then we have our individual soul called the Jivatman, the living soul. And that soul has certain attributes, certain qualities, which we call the Sattva Guna, or the 6 properties of the light of the soul, of the individual soul. It has 6 properties because this soul, this individual soul that we all have, it has to be in activity. It has to be in the world. It has to experience the world. So it has to have some kind of activity there, some kind of properties. And it has 6 properties. Again, we call that light sattva or consciousness, but I'll try to make it a little more clear. But this light, which we have, it needs our mind, it needs our brain, it needs our senses in order to express in the world. We have this inner light of our soul with its light, and this light in the soul will go lifetime to lifetime, and it has certain vibrations, good and bad bugs, we could say, good and bad vibrations that carry forth from lifetime to lifetime, because the Vedic science believes in the continuation of life, which people refer to as reincarnation. So from lifetime to lifetime, the light and whatever vibration it carries will go forward. But in each life, it has to have a mind, the mind, like the sun is the light, right? And the moon is the mind that reflects the light. And the senses are the extension of the mind, which the mind actually looks both ways. It looks outward through the senses, but it's also connected inward to the light of the soul, to the wisdom of that soul's light. It has wisdom. It has wisdom, and that wisdom comes from its first guna, first property called the buddhi, the satya buddhi, the buddhi that is spiritual beauty, spiritual intellect, we could say, versus the mental intellect. That's called the satya buddhi, which understands, depending on how well it's working and how well we have used it lifetime to lifetime, how it understands its experiences in the world and how it stays connected to the soul. So that's the buddhi. And then I'm not going to go over every detail, but then we mentioned there's the seed. These are like vibrational seeds. And so at the top of this Star of David, you have like the buddhi. Then on one side, you have sukha, the pleasure, the bliss. And on the other side, you have not the joyous, you have the dukkha, the misery. Because when we're in this world, we have to know about the duality of life, pleasure and pain, all dualities we experience. So we have to have those seeds in our light to know what those are. We may not have any misery in us, and we don't want to. We want to keep that sukha seed with a lot of energy, a higher bar. In the dukkha, the misery seed as a seed, so it doesn't sprout into our experience. And then if we go down further in this diagram of a Star of David, on the left side again, we have the Icha, which is our positive desires, our desire to do positive things. And then on the right side, we have our aversions, or we can also call it hate, things we do not like. It's called dvesha. But we want to keep that dvesha as a seed. We have to know what hate is. Somebody might hate us, but we may not hate them. So we have to know what that is to be in this world. And the light can't do anything without some effort. So at the bottom of the Star of David is a seed called prayatna. Prayatna means effort. So you have a great desire to meditate. Without some effort in that light, your light will not be able to command the mind and the senses to walk to the meditation room. Because you see, the mind and the light are connected to different degree in different people. Not everyone has that full connection and communication with their soul's light, their soul wisdom. So what happens then, their mind is possessed by their senses. We call these the five horses, which can lead us to do things we know that are not good for us, or do things we may not know are not good, but they're not good, to use our senses in a wrong way, to stay up late when we should go to bed, to watch a movie that's a horror movie at midnight versus getting in bed at 10 o'clock. Because how we use our senses in Ayurveda is going to determine how healthy we are. We have with our senses, we can have an overuse of the senses, we can have an underuse or no use of the senses, and we can have a misuse of our senses. And all of these can create disease. Overuse, misuse, wrong use can all create a disease, according to Ayurveda. So many diseases, or imbalances, which later become diseases. So again, the soul is the silence. It's the bliss. It's just in bliss. But then the individual soul, which is a part of this cosmic soul, has that light, which can have good and bad vibrations. So we covered that a little more in depth last week, so I don't want to talk too long about that. And this is a very interesting point. But to recap that, so this is the gem, the soul, the individual soul. It has the 6 gunas. Somebody has more, somebody has less of these 6 gunas, but they're all there. And the 2 that we don't want to do anything at all are the dukkha, the misery seed, keep it as a seed, and the dvesha, we don't want to water that seed, the aversion seed or the hate seed. But everybody has all 6 seeds. Even a saint has all 6 seeds of the light of the soul. And then we have, very interestingly, there are 16 types of light, 16 types of sattva, which are mentioned in certain texts. The main text we use in Ayurveda is the Charak Samhita by Rishi Charak. And then there's a Kashyap Samhita. Another Rishi is very famous, Sushrut Samhita, famous Ayurvedic Rishi and surgeon. And then another text, the Ashtanga Hridaya. So they all describe 16 types of sattva. So they're like personality types in a way. Different proportions. Everybody has a unique proportion, but we can condense them into 16 types. Different proportions of the 6 gunas multiplying into 16 types. But again, everybody is individual. Just like, although we say there's X number of body types, some people like to say 7, some people say 10. But in reality, every body's constitution is unique, specific for that person. So why is everybody's face different? Why is everybody's voice different? Why is everybody's behavior different? So many differences between individuals. It starts with this, and everybody's DNA is different. It starts with their difference in the light of their soul. That light determines these differences between individuals. So Vaidya Mishra used to tell me he said, but don't worry about of the 16 types, only 3 are very destructive. Three of these light types, sattva types, are very bad, destructive type light, a person. He said, they're very dark, they're very destructive, but he says, don't worry about people like that coming to you for an Ayurvedic consultation. He said it might happen, but it probably never will. He said these 3 bad types they don't care about eating well. They don't care about following God's laws. They basically care about being destructive and misusing their senses and doing bad karma, staying up, drink, smoke, drugs, et cetera, et cetera. So he said, basically, rarely will you get this type of person with that bad light. And if I recall correctly, he said that if you do, there may not be, I'll emphasize may not be, much that you can do to support that person Ayurvedically, except to pray for them, because they're not going to follow any recommendations, basically. He said, you can pray for them, maybe do something of that nature, but to get them to change their ways is going to be a big challenge. So, but he said, rarely do you get that kind of person in there for a consult. So again, why do we have these, I will go back to the 6 gunas. Why do they even exist? Again, I mentioned that briefly. Again, the universal soul has no properties, no gunas. Inside the gem, there's no guna. It's nirgun, means without guna. But as the individual soul, these properties are called saguna. They're with gunas. The cosmic soul, the Atma, is beyond the gunas. It's all light, it's all bliss, it's eternal, beyond pathology, beyond the 3 gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas. There is no sattvic, there is no rajas, there is no action, there is no guna. But when the jivatma, the individual soul, is being formed, we have to be, as a human being, we have to be in action in our day-to-day life, and that's why the gunas are there. So that's why, because we're living, we have to be in action. There has to be some imbalances, not imbalances, but the gunas have to exist. And that's why we have the light with the gunas, so that we can be in day-to-day action in our life. But the gunas are there for what reason? Of the soul. Those gunas are actually there to give us wisdom. The buddhi is there, our individual intellect, our spiritual intellect. It's there to give us wisdom and to stay on the path, to not make mistakes. And as long as we're having good connection and communication between our mind and the light of the soul, then we tend to stay on the path to good health, to good behavior, to proper doing the right thing at the right time, when we have that wisdom which is inherent in our light, when the mind has that connection. But again, that's not easy to do, because these horses, the 5 sense organs, as Vaidya Mishra said, they know they're not coming back next lifetime. So basically, they don't care. They would rather, by hook or crook, he said, the senses want to enjoy the world, by hook or crook. And he said, you can't beat the horses, the senses, you can't whip them, you can't, you can't force them not to do some of the things they want to do. Sometimes you have to allow them to have their their fun. You can't be too strict with your senses as an individual. That doesn't work either. Sooner or later, the horses will put you in a ditch. Like he liked to always say, like, I always drive to my house from the office and I go by India Sweets and Spices. And automatically, he says, automatically, my car goes to the right. He says, because I want to go and have my cup of chai and maybe some pakora or something. He said, he used to say, but I've gotten better. I don't do that anymore. But that's how automatic these sense organs, when they get used to something they enjoy, they kind of almost automatically want to do that thing. And but the more connection, the more communication that we have with our gym and in the light of that gym, the better we are able to automatically follow the right path and to stay healthy and to do the right thing at the right time. That's wisdom. That's spiritual wisdom versus simple mental understanding, which is the job of the mental intellect we call mano buddhi. The other intellect is called the satya buddhi. And they should have good connection, good communication, so that light flows to the mind and governs the mind versus the senses governing the mind. So these gunas are there to give us gyan, to give us the wisdom. In the bliss of wisdom, we call ghana sukh. This is not sensual pleasure. This is not mental pleasure. This is spiritual bliss, the bliss of wisdom, called jnana sukh. Sukha means bliss, jnana means the knowledge. So we actually have in Ayurveda, we actually have a type of treatment therapy we call Sattva Vijay. Sattva, light, Vijay means victory. So in the Charaka Samhita, it says very clearly that if somebody has a problem, see, not all diseases originate from our bad diet, our bad lifestyle, our bad behavior, from exposure to toxins. So whatever those outer reasons are, even mental issues with our health. Some of these origins of diseases actually originate in the light of the soul, carried forth from a previous lifetimes and born into this lifetime. From birth, there are some pathological vibrations in the light of the soul, which may in the future sprout into a pathology. And so that's why in Charaka Samhita they talk about Sattva Vijay, which means winning over the light. But actually, another translation, that's how it translates, but another meaning is cleaning the light of the soul, cleaning out the bad vibrations of the light of the soul. And that is a treatment method mentioned in the Charaka Samhita when the disease does not originate from the physical mind and does not originate from the outside. And that treatment is Sattva Vijay, cleaning the light of the soul or winning over that light. And how they do that? Well, there could be many ways. Yagyas, prayer, meditation to clean this light, to win over the light. Rituals, service, seva, satsang, association with, basically satsang means association with the truth, meeting with spiritually minded people in groups. So these are ways in order to clean the light and remove the vibrations that have sprouted into a pathology or imbalances, which in time give rise to a known disease. So cleaning the light. And so what it says in the Charaka Samhita, and what Vaidya Mishra says, go to pilgrimage, meditate, think positive, don't think bad about anybody, get rid of your jealousy, your greed, because all these behaviors and thoughts are disturbing your light. But again, he says, even wearing divine garlands are part of that therapy, Sattva Vijay. Being in nature itself is another type of Sattva Vijay therapy, being in the nature. But it helps, but it's not easy. Because he says the first thing that we have to do, if we want to really clean the light, the first thing that we have to do is to enhance the coordination between our thought, speech, and action. Because basically, the imbalances arose because our thought, speech, and action lacked coordination. Thinking one thing, doing another thing, speaking one way, acting another way, that creates the mistake of the intellect, the pragya parad, where the mental buddhi and the mental buddhi and the spiritual buddhi are not connected and communicating with each other properly. What we do with our mental buddhi in time can derange our spiritual buddhi, spiritual intellect. So all those things like unconditional forgiveness, again, Vajra likes to say following the path of God, these are all things to help clean the light. But the main thing, he says, is to try to create the coordination between our thought, our speech, and our action. And now you will perhaps be fascinated to know that there are, so we talked about the 16 types of light. We didn't give them names. And in fact, I don't know their names, but I know there are names for those, I'm quite sure. But we have three kinds of sattva and three kinds of light in terms of our strength, the strength of the light, the strength, the brightness. See, this light is within us, right? But it radiates outward into our aura. Our aura is nothing but the pranic, the more dynamic area of the light. The aura is the pranic, dynamic, vibrational field that interacts with the environment to receive prana. So the light, or rather prana, the life intelligence that creates everything, the dynamism, we say that it rides on the light. So the light comes out around us, and that's our aura. And of course, we want to have a very bright aura. That means we're more healthy and we're able to receive more prana from our food, our water, the air, our thoughts, our emotions. So the aura is the pranic area of the light, because prana rides on the light. And I'll go into that in more details in just a minute. But there are three kinds of soul light in terms of their strength. And one is called, let me see if I can remember. Yes, it's pravar. It's called Pravar-Sattva. This is from Charaka Samhita. It means your light is very clean. You don't have any bad vibrations in your light. It's a very bright light called Pravar-Sattva. So, and then there's a medium strength of a light we call Madhyam Sattva. Madhya means middle. It's like a middle strength. And then there's a very weak light, very not, a lot of bad vibrations in that light that is carried in the light of the soul. And that's called Heen Sattva. Heen means low, weak. So why is it important to understand the three types of light Ayurvedically? There's probably many reasons, but I'll tell you what the main example is given by Vaidya Mishra. Say a patient goes to the doctor. Doctor says, you have this cancer, and I have to tell you legally, but based on all the research, you have 6 months to live. So And of course, the doctor would say, well, why would you say that, doctor? Put the fear in the patient, right? I have to say that because if anything happens, I'm not going to be liable. So legally, he's based on the research, based on his knowledge, the doctor has to say that. So what happens? That puts a big seed of fear into that person. If their light is weak, if they have a hreet, that weak light, fear will sprout immediately. And then they'll be freaking out. Okay, I have to call my attorney, get my will ready, things of that nature. It's doctor doesn't mean bad, but in some situations, even uttering that word, depending on how they do it, how much awareness they have in talking to that patient, you plant such a seed of fear in that patient that they do die in 6 months. But then we know people who don't, no matter what the diagnosis is. They say, "Oh, I'm not going to die." They don't freak out, right? Okay, all right. Thank you. I got it. We'll take care. Yeah. They maintain their strength. They have a strong light. They have a physical disease. Maybe who knows what Agent Orange or some toxin they got exposed to, perhaps something very toxic like that created some cancer, but their light is still strong. They still have the inner strength to not let that, when that inner strength of their light that actually is as a saving grace to give them more recovery power and to follow the right path, the right diet and the right lifestyle to recover. But they have that inner strength. They don't just immediately okay, give up. So this is one example Vaidya Mishra gives, that somebody with a low power light, weak light, anything can be a shock to them. Anything can negatively affect their confidence and their healing powers that come from within. Whereas a person with a powerful light from birth, even things that are serious, they have more power to handle those things and to recover. So I know Dr. Marianne Toddebaum gave an example of her own mother who had brain cancer. Oh, she's not going to live more than 6 months. But Marianne worked with her. She did therapies and this and that. And, 3 years later, 4 years later, every time she went back, she said, well, they still say I won't be here, but she was there. So that's one reason we need to understand what kind of light a person has. It's also your power of disease resistance and disease recovery when you have a powerful light, Sattva light versus that low Sattva, which is called Sattva. Yeah, the Sattva people may even always be going to the doctor because they're always worried that something's wrong, even when they don't find something wrong. There's many reasons we should understand the types of light, the strength of the light. Again, so there are 3 strengths of the light. The powerful light, light is clean. The middle one, Madhya Sattva, and the Sattva, very weak light. Person is very delicate, basically, very fearful, very worried. We should be aware of that. So, as we mentioned, Noreen and I said tonight's talk also, what is the definition of health in Ayurveda? So that as it applies to the light of the soul, because there's a more detailed definition given in Ayurveda, but the simplest definition of health in Ayurveda is called swasmin tishtati iti swastaha. Basically means, we want to translate it into English, it means whose mind is always connected to the light of the soul. That person is healthy, whose mind is continuously, uninterruptedly connected to the light of their soul, that person is healthy. So that means the person who is always with himself, herself, they're always established in themselves. That's the foundation of immunity, actually. Being established in herself is the foundation of our immunity, our immune system. When you're connected always to your soul's light, you have tremendous immunity, because the pranic energy rides on the light, and the pranic energy governs everything, creates everything in the environment and also our body. So that's the simple definition of health, is being established in your own self, which is the uninterrupted connection and communication between the heart, the soul, and the mind. Again, though, as Vaidya says, it's a simple definition, but it's not easy. We know from our own experience, it's not so easy to maintain that connection, because these horses do not want to do that. If your mind gets taken over by the horses, the senses, your mind is not connected to the light of the soul, you make mistakes. Then the horses would take you away from doing what is the best thing for you to do. As Vaidya Mishra says, because these horses don't want to learn. They don't want to go to traffic school, because they want to have fun in life. They don't care about the body. They don't care about the light. They don't want your mind to be connected to the light of the soul. That's the senses. And then there's another therapy we have in Ayurveda called Indriya Shuddhi, cleaning the sense organs, but that's another topic. Cleaning our sense organs. So my next topic is sattva and prana, and I've already touched upon that. How is prana connected to the soul? You see, the soul is like the kernel around which we revolve. It's like that center. Actually, I should go to the heart lotus now. It'll be more clear. So you have a gem, you have your individual soul, your jivatma, which communicates with your mind, and the mind, then the senses. And of course, you need the brain there too. But in between the mind and the soul and the light of the soul is something we call the heart lotus. Sanskrit word is hreet, pundareek. Hreet means heart. Pundareek means the lotus. It's called a heart lotus. It's not a physical, it's a metaphorical lotus, obviously. It's a vibrational structure that resides in the center of our body, in the center of our chest area. And we say that the soul sits in the middle of the bottom of the heart lotus. The soul sits in the middle of the bottom of the heart lotus. And this lotus has 16 petals, which again, it's a metaphorical description. The 16 petals are 16 Shaktis of the Mother Divine, 16 types of energy, Shakti. And that lotus sits there in the middle of the lotus. I mean, the gem sits in the middle of the lotus at the bottom. Imagine a lotus flower at the bottom in the middle. There's the soul. And this lotus can be like a flower. It can be completely open. It can be completely closed, or it can be half open and half closed. So why is that significant? Because it's like a mediator. The light of the soul and the prana that rides on that light can only fully be expressed when the heart lotus is completely open. But the heart lotus is there to protect the soul. See, the soul doesn't want to deal with this yucky world in a way. So the gem, the Shaktis are there to protect that soul. And to do that, sometimes it has to close. Because we say that there is a glue, we call it a glue, it's another metaphor, that there's a glue called param Ojas, and there are 8 drops of this glue that glue the gem in its light to the heart lotus. And through that lotus, the soul interacts with our mind and our physiology and our senses through the lotus. So the lotus is there to protect the gem and to protect the glue, because whenever we have stress, whenever we have anger, whenever we have to face a lot of challenges, sometimes those situations can burn the glue. And Charaka Samhita says, this glue has to be exactly 8 drops, even a little bit less, even a little bit weak. Soul runs away from the body. So the glue is there to the heart lotus, and through the lotus, the gem communicates with the mind. So the lotus should be there, should be open. When it's open, then we get the full measure of our light, and that's sattva going to the mind, depending on how clean our light is. But sometimes a person is a great soul, a lot of good light, a lot of bright light, and everything is going great, but then some trauma happens in life, and the heart lotus shuts down, and so the light is not fully reaching the mind, depending on whether it's shut halfway down or all the way down. So light doesn't go to the mind gets possessed by the senses, start doing mistakes in our life. Even a good person, not a good person or bad person, but someone who has a very good light, very clean light, something happened, they weren't able to eat right one day, and they ate some really bad food, and that shut their heart lotus down, or maybe their husband or wife screamed at them out of the blue, who knows what, but the lotus can open and close. And it does that to protect the glue, protect the gem from running away from the body. Because when the soul leaves, then we're not alive. Deha prana samyoge ayuhu. That is the definition of life. Deha is the body, prana, the intelligence, the vibration coming from God, the prana. Deha, prana, the union of those things is life. Deha, prana, union of the body with the prana. So long as prana is flowing in the body, we are alive. And when prana goes, we're not alive. And when the soul goes, there is no more prana. Once the soul leaves, there's no more. That's what it is. This pranic energy has to be there. So the lotus is a protective factor with these 16 Shakti, 16 petals. And there's a lot of details here, which would take hours to talk about, such as when these 8 drops are forming, 2 drops form each petal. Each petal gets, when this 8 drops are forming, when there's the baby's in the womb, gestation is happening. There's a lot of details, such as each drop is connected to 2 petals of the lotus, each of those drops. But this pranic intelligence, is our aura. You see the God's picture, the bright aura. Well, that is the pranic area of the light. That's the pranic area of the light of the soul. And when the lotus is open, if a person doesn't have an open heart, then no matter how good light they have, that light is not going to be fully visible. And let me see, I think we're at 40 minutes, yeah? Let me see if there's one thing I can wrap up with this. Oh, samadhi?
Sure, it's a good time. Do you want to save that for next time, Jim? Or do you want to continue?
It's brief.
Okay,
it's brief,
then go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's brief. It ties in. Some people hear the word, enlightenment. Well, what is enlightenment? Sure, there are a lot of descriptions, depending on your philosophy and what text you read. But basically, in SVA, we say samadhi the word samadhi comes from the root word sama, which means balance or equal, plus D, which means the intellect. D, sama, D becomes samadhi, the balanced D, the balanced buddhi. which basically means the balance and coordination between the mano buddhi and the spiritual buddhi, the satya buddhi. When those two have uninterrupted connection and communication, the mental buddhi with the spiritual buddhi, that is samadhi. Basically, that is your basic, I guess you could say your basic enlightenment. The balance of the coordination, connection with the mental intellect with the spiritual intellect. Samadhi, balance, the balance buddhi. So that's a simple definition of the word samadhi, what people talk about samadhi. And of course, there's so many paths to samadhi. Even using herbs can help promote the experience of samadhi. Different herbs, different very spiritual herbs such as Arjuna, Ashoka, Tulsi, Brahmi. People have heard of all these herbs, but they are actually mentioned as one of the ways to achieve samadhi, the use of certain herbs. So that will conclude and open now for the questions.
Sure, Jim, thank you so much. That was awesome. And I know Bobby Joe has joined us. Bobby Joe, would you like to join Jim on the video?
Yeah.
Pull up a chair.
Come on in, get a chair. We're live. Why not? That was wonderful, Jim. Thank you so much for sharing that knowledge.
Well, you can be easier to hear you now.
Yes.
Are you moving into the video with Jim, Bobby Joe, or are you gonna?
He wants to stay
Well,
up.
I'm sitting next to him already, so.
But she's not.
Okay. Are you? Come on in the video. We can't see you.
Oh, it's kind of.
I'll move
Yeah,
on.
come on in, Jim. We'll don't mean to push you over, Jim. Great, awesome thing. Bobby Joe, let's start out. You have any specific questions about anything that Jim shared that is really pops out for you? And questions are a good way to introduce people to knowledge and of varying levels. It really helps. So any questions that you have would be really helpful.
Curious, the 8 drops you're talking about, is that Ojas or is that something different?
No, it is Ojas, but it's
Okay.
there's 2 types of Ojas, and that is called Param Ojas.
Oh,
That's a very
okay.
that Ojas has to be 8 drops exactly. No less, can't be.
Okay, so it's different than
the other Ojas you've heard of called
Yeah.
Apar Ojas. That's
Okay.
the Anjali, the full, is it half Anjali or Ard Anjali? I think it's a full Anjali. You should have. You can have less.
Mhm.
You won't die just
Mhm.
from having less. But this one is 8 bindu, 8 drop. You can't have even a little bit less.
Okay, and that's only located in the heart lotus then?
That's the glue between the gem
Okay.
and the heart lotus.
Okay.
Which is how the soul interacts with us, our bodies, our mind, our senses.
Mhm. And you're talking about the low light.
I'll have you just move slightly over, Bobby Joe, into the video because we can't see you. So that's great. That's better. Great. All right. What were you gonna say? You had another question for Jim?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Jim about the low light.
Mhm.
Somebody who's really worried. How would Vaidya Mishra approach somebody who is very worried as far as treatment goes, talking about imbalances and how would you help them to increase their light and less worry? How would you approach
one of the good question, and one of the things he would do, even to his wisdom of pulse taking, is assess what kind of light the person has.
Mhm.
Very deep pulse skill. I don't know how to do that. The 16, he can identify which type of the 16 the person has
Wow.
in the light. He told me about my light. He said, basically, you have a good light. And I won't go into the rest of what he said. But he said, basically, you have a good light.
Mostly,
He said, before you started working with me, and I took you to be, to work with me and train the team, I scanned your light.
Oh, good. I'm sure he did. Yeah.
He said, I scanned your light. So he could assess those 16 types of light. But basically, how he would handle would be individual, but general in the sense that he would know that the person has to be handled more delicately. And he, a lot of times he would use, because he had zillion stories from the Mahabharata, the great epics of India, the Ramayana, and this and that, all these stories. He would often tell stories to help And also he would connect, that's one of the things about the skill of a great Vajra is connecting heart to heart, light to light, connecting that light to light connection.
Yeah, that actually, Dr. Robert Sabota shares that as well, that, there has to be the heart of the Vaidya, the heart of the healer is,
Yeah, and it means
if you don't have that heart and that caring, then I
Yeah,
think healing, it's hard to really,
right, the emotional
act as a catalyst for helping others heal.
Then there's pranacharyas. They just, they just heal you with their prana. They have so much.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But I don't want to detract from Bobby Joe's question about
so it would
if somebody has low light and they're just, to me, that really translates to some extent with that their vitality, if we put it in Western language, that they're lacking vitality.
Bala is not there because the prana rises.
Yeah, the bala is the strength of the person, the vigor,
there's
vitality.
The vyadi, not vyadi, but there's a term vyadi shamatva, something like that. It means basically the immunity. The bala, there's all kind of balas, mental bala, spiritual, sensual bala. This is like the spiritual bala, the spiritual strength, low. So how we would handle, I've seen him tell stories to people that probably were in that boat, that situation. I've seen him, the herbs that he recommends, and just he had a way to give confidence. He certainly, seeing all the different clients with him, he had a way to, again, that light to light, and he also had his, certain mantras that that he, when taking the pulse, there's the use of certain mantras to help with this situation, right?
Okay. So he was actually chanting a mantra silently, or he was saying a mantra out loud, or was he giving
I can't say that he did that with every client, but this is what he would do silently.
I see. So he wasn't necessarily giving the person a mantra to the power of vibration in terms of okay, I see. Right.
Something I think
he was healing with the power of mantra.
Yeah, specific mantra I think he used. I don't say he did that. And we can do that ourselves.
Of course, yeah.
See, there's 7 vibrational. I don't want to go into that. It's too deep. It's about
functioning. Let's stay with the question that, I know it's not, Ayurveda is very personalized. It's not a one size fits all. But if somebody really does have low immunity, low light, low vitality, so some of the things might be, well, you talked about some people who don't even you don't expect certain people with very low light to come to an Ayurvedic healer.
No, it doesn't mean low light doesn't mean they're bad light. It just means they don't have
okay, that was the bad. Yeah, that was the quote unquote bad. So I know it's not a one size fits all, but some of the things that healing things may be the power of mantra. Are there other things that just, we're talking very generally here, and nothing is intended to be medical advice whatsoever. But what other things are helpful?
Well, in terms of being a practitioner, your own confidence, that confidence in knowing what you're doing, the patient will know. They know. Yeah. Usually they can feel it and they can experience. I can just put it so everybody most everybody that I ever saw Vaidya when I was with him were always uplifted. They felt better. They felt happier. They felt like they had a path. They had a plan. They had a program that, that wasn't too hard, but they had to do something in terms of their diet.
All right. And sure. So having feeling that there's that connection with the healing power of the healer, and
having confidence in your doctor is always with any medical profession, having confidence in that person who's giving you some advice and giving you recommendations for herbs or whatever. That if you don't have that confidence in them, you are not going to do anything.
Sure.
So he had that presence. In my opinion, he had that presence to instill that confidence, and we should all have that confidence in ourselves that what we're doing, that we can instill that. And then there's those esoteric things like the use of the mantras and we can't all expect to learn all these stories like he learned from childhood.
Well,
to help.
we may have different stories, there's no doubt, but or different examples that we can share from our own experience.
Yeah.
Anything else, Bobby Joe, that comes to mind after Jim's talk?
Well, I just had one thing. I was curious about the herbs that help enlightenment.
Well, good.
Oh yeah. Is there? Let's the short route to samadhi.
Sure.
You're right.
Well,
What's the quickest route?
yeah,
Brahmi
well,
is what you're saying?
No, but remember I told you the one time the first thing you should do is learn to use a samadhi set. Vaidya Mishra created some herbal transdermal products we call the samadhi set, which we can use independently, but it's best if we have a meditation practice to use them right before meditation. They will already put you in the meditative connection, and that's what it's the samadhi set is there. It consists of 4 things: an Arjuna transdermal or Ashoka. You can use one or the other or you can alternate, because Arjuna gives more confidence to your heart open.
Yeah.
Your heart level open. And Ashoka helps clean out the griefy vibrations that are sitting in the light, since who knows this life or another life. Ashoka means no grief. There's a tree. And Arjuna comes from the bark of a tree. Ashoka comes from the bark of a tree. Vaidya Mishra said, my father showed me all these things. He said, we went out into the jungle. I hugged the Ashoka tree, and I could just feel like the bliss from hugging the tree. So, but he's put them in a transdermal medium so we can easily use them. We use them energy points called marma. So the first thing we open our heart lotus with the samadhi set with Arjuna or Ashoka on 4 certain. I'm not going into detail, but there are 4 marmas we put them on. After that, good. You've opened your lotus. More light's coming, but still your mind has to receive that light. You have to empower the mind. For that, we use Brahmi on the pulse area. So Brahmi enhances the mind's powers of learning, called Deidriti.
Sure. It's one of the best rasayanas for the mind. Yeah.
So the light is coming to the mind, but the mind still needs more power to receive it, right? Because the mind may not have your lotus is open, but your mind might not have the power to receive it. So Brahmi gives that. And then after that, we want to get those horses under better control. Instead of them wanting to enjoy this world and perceive things and taste things and feel things and smell things that they like, we want them to turn inward to the light of the soul. The mind, we want to empower the mind to control those horses versus the horses controlling the mind. The mind should be in control, not the other way around. So we have Tulsi, a very spiritual plant. Everybody's heard of it, called Tulsi. We put on a point here, a marma here, the Stapani marma, and here called the Kant marma. And this empowers the mind to have more
receptivity and sattva.
It gives light immediately to the mind. When the mind has more power, it gives the mind more power to manage these horses better.
Awesome.
And then we can settle down, because sometimes
I actually think that you bring a great point, that these are important, but also our meditation practice is really key. And I would love to continue talking about this when we start up next time with the Ayurveda Cafe.
Yes.
Jim will continue sharing the teachings of Vaidya Mishra, his wonderful teacher. So thank you so much, Jim.
I gave everyone some food for thought. It's a big topic we talked about tonight, and it's compressed into 40 minutes. But it's where to go to look for it.
Awesome. This was wonderful.